Welcome to DejaVue, your favorite Vue podcast, although you might not know it yet. Although, actually, a couple of you have mentioned that you do know it yet, and so that's great to hear. I am with Eduardo. Many of you know him. He is the author of Pina, VueRouter, member of the Vue.js core team. He is a freelancer. He's got this course, Mastering Pinia. He gives talks. He is everywhere. He does lots of things. You can follow him on Twitter. He's got lots of great tweets. And today we're going to talk about all sorts of things. And yeah, glad to have you here.
Hi, Michael. I'm really glad to be here with you. It's just a shame Alex is not here today, but really happy to be with you here.
Yeah, he's away at the Germany conference. So yeah, lots of conferences going on this time of year. Next month, I think me and you and Alex will be in Toronto together. So yeah, that'll be
next
nice.
Week. Yeah, next week is VueFest. I will be in Japan, Tokyo.
Oh yeah. Then there's there's that one. Yeah, there's so many to keep track of. I wish I could have the time to like make it to every single one, but then I think I would just be like traveling from like September to the end of November, just like traveling and flying. And yeah,
I think it's more than one per month if you average it, if you put everything. And sometimes you don't want to do only Vue conferences, right? You want to do more JavaScript conferences. So you put in there a few that are really well known around the world, and then it's just too much. Sometimes they overlaps, so you cannot even do it.
Yeah, I haven't even been to a non-Vue conference. I haven't been to that many conferences, so I've been thinking about branching out and trying to figure out which ones to go to, and there are so many. So you'll have to give me some recommendations, maybe.
Yeah, I guess in your case it will be North America.
Yeah.
Or it will be North America. I would say you have Latin America. For me, it's also nice because they speak Spanish.
Oh yeah.
So for me, it's even better than a conference in the US or in Canada. And so there is JSConf Mexico, for example. I think it's next week. No, it's the end of this month, actually. It's in coincidence with the Fiesta de los Muertos, which is it's the same day as Halloween.
Okay.
And I think in Christian religion, there is another name I always forget because I only know it in Spanish and then I forget in other languages. I think it's Reincarnation. No, it's not Reincarnation. Day of the Saints, maybe. Day of the Dead. I don't know. Anyway, so it's in coincidence through that with that period of the year. So in Mexico specifically, they also it's a very nice period to visit because apparently I've never been in that period of the year, but they have some decorations that are really pretty. They put flowers and do these kind of altars to the dead. I don't know if that's a correct word in English to say to the dead, but I think people will get the meaning anyway. So it's really pretty. And there is the JSConf Mexico, which is by the end of this month. So that one, if you want to learn Spanish. Otherwise, I will go to the JSConfs if I were you.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to get.
Yeah, the North American ones are easier for me to get to for sure, but it's also nice to like travel to Europe and then I can, tack on a little vacation at the end and
I can agree on that.
If I have the time for that.
Yeah.
So I have this question that I've actually written about, but I figured that I would ask you because you are the state management guy, and whether you like that title or not, I think you have it. And so you've created Pina, and before that you had VueRouter, and so you've been like doing a bunch of stuff. What was your involvement with VueX? I can't remember.
VueX, I was there helping out a little bit, but honestly, the whole API of the library was just stable, and it was what it was. And I wanted to improve the TypeScript version. I want to have something more friendly, so that's why I ended up creating Pina. My involvement was rather triaging. It's like the library was already there when I arrived. So maybe some bug fixes. I'm not even sure I contributed to the code.
Yeah,
probably, but nothing big.
And so Pina is sort of like I would say the standard state management library now with Vue 3.
It works for Vue too.
And Vue 2. I haven't used Vue 2 in years, so that's the. I mean, there are definitely lots of people still using Vue 2. Yeah, that's good to know. If you are using Vue 2, you can still use Pina. So Pina is the standard thing, but we've also got ref and reactive for state management, and we can create like these simple composables that can do like a little bit of light state management. And if you're using Nuxt, you've also got useState, which handles SSR things. There's like a couple little like edge cases and stuff like that with hydration and some security things that we want to take care of there. And so the question is, okay, we've got these like three main ways of doing state, and how do we know when to use which one? Like, when should we be using Pina versus just using a couple refs versus creating a composable? Or how do you think through this problem yourself? Maybe there isn't like a single answer or a best practice, but like at least just like, yeah, take us through your thinking on that.
Yeah, there isn't a single answer. And the reason is because you have people who work different ways and they like to organize their thoughts in different ways. And the composition API makes things very freestyle. That's not the correct way to say in English, but you are really free to organize the code however you want. And that has its good parts and its bad parts. I think it has been covered in other episodes with Evan Yo. So Pina, when you use the setup stores, which I will really encourage people to use most of the time because they are really more powerful and flexible, you really have something that looks like a composable. And that's very intentional, right? Like, I want that to feel as close to Pina as possible because you can reuse all the patterns and the knowledge that you already know, and you're not really wasting your time learning. So you cannot say, oh, but maybe this disappears later on, and then I will have learned something that I will never use, because that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And so for me personally, I can see stores as services. And I've seen other people who also do that. That makes me a little bit happy, right? When you see that other people actually got that on your library. So I want to use them to encapsulate some logic, not only the state, but also the logic that manipulates the state and interacts with the state. And then the API is designed so that you can really split these small sections of your logic, of your business logic, into different stores, and then reuse them and combine them however you want. There is a lot of people, and I think this comes from VueX or other, I think maybe in Redux, there was also a performance improvement when you were using Redux in React. So I think it has a lot of background history, and people tend to use global state a lot, way too much. Mm-hmm. Not only because it's convenient, but sometimes it was actually solving other issues like performance in other frameworks. And so they get used to those patterns. Personally, I try to, of course, avoid that. And if I see it in projects I work with, I try to explain why and propose other ways. So I will really use it for that global state that also has some business logic attached to it. For example, the classic example of a card, usually you have some logic attached to it. But another one that I like more is the authentication and the login. You usually have that information across your application. And depending on the application, it's small, but it's not, it can be, most of the time it's really small, but you still have some other login functions, etc. And this service creates an abstraction layer for your application so that if you were using Lucia or Lucia, I don't know how they pronounce that. For me, it's a Spanish name, so I say Lucia, the authentication library. So the author said a few days ago, maybe yesterday, or I don't know, it was really recent, that they were deprecating the library and they wanted to just use it as a learning material. So people would just check the code to learn how authentication works. For reasons, I mean, they have their reasons. So you then realize you have to switch to something else, or maybe you migrate to Nuxt and you want to use Nuxt auth utils. So because you have this abstraction layer that helps you evolve your application. So I think this is a good way of also thinking and finding that separation layer. I wouldn't use a store if I only need one piece of state. So for example, I would prefer using useState if I'm using Nuxt. And of course, if I don't need something global, like anything that is UI and it's really encapsulated in the components. This is the easiest case, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't go in a store.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So you're saying the things that are global should go into Pina, but have as little global things as possible. Is that?
Yeah, that's
correct?
correct. You have
Okay.
as little global things as possible, and state that is global usually is comes with some business logic.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that business logic, or if that business logic is not reused, then I would probably stay with use state most of the time. Or you can see stores or services.
Right. Yeah. And like, I think that makes a lot of sense. I've been doing more recently where I like to, like, it's good to have logic in your component and keep that state local. But then I often pull the logic out into a separate file just because I like to have things readable and like smaller files. So if I've got like, I don't know, like a bunch of methods, then I'll pull it out. And even if that's only used in one component and not reused elsewhere, then it's still sometimes nice to have that pulled out into a separate thing. And then, I mean, some people don't like that and they say, oh, too many files. And, everyone has, like you said before, everyone has like a different way of working and how they like to structure things and stuff. But I don't know, I like that works well for me. And so it's not about, the composables are less about global state and more about like organizing logic. Whereas then I guess Pina is, well, I want this thing as a global, I've got a user and their authenticated state and like their email address or whatever, their avatar image. And I want to be able to use that like throughout the app in different places. And so then put that in a Pina store.
Yeah. I think another thing that maybe helps some people click is that when we look at stores with the options API, so state, actions, and getters, they are so simple that it doesn't come off as something very flexible or something where you can have a service. And so when you start using setup stores, because you have the full flexibility of just a function and returning whatever you want, until you don't do that, you don't get to see the full picture of what you can do. And so I have this talk of that is called Disaster Class Pinia. I think you've probably seen it in person or you were there. But it talks a little bit about this. And it says, I say at some point that I like to see stores are composable singletons with SSR support. So it's like a composable where you have the full power of a composable, but it only happens once too. There are like tons of ways of using Pinia, and I know sometimes it's just the lazy way. And this is when it's just the lazy way, it's probably not the good tool, right? You could use just a ref sometimes. Also, if you don't have SSR, right, you can use a global ref and it works well. Although I wouldn't recommend that because you never know. You move to Nuxt, you move to server-side generation. We get into the complexities of web development too.
Well, I think it's an interesting point about the like being lazy, because I think that's a lot of things are affected by that. So when Evan was on talking about composition API and options API, he also mentioned that with the composition API, it's better, but only if you're actually like thinking through your stuff. And if you're going to be lazy about it, then it can end up with like this mess. Whereas the options API, it forces you to have like some minimum level of discipline in like how things are organized. And so I think, and even like, I mean, you could probably look at any tool or any library, and like if you're lazy with it, then it it ends up working poorly for you. And just because you have Pina doesn't mean you can't just stop thinking about what you're doing, So you have this course, Mastering Pinia. My question is, so I've created a bunch of courses. As many of you know, that is my job. And so I was wondering, from your perspective, as you created the course and as you are sending it out to people and getting some feedback, were there things that people found surprising or insightful, or things that you thought were surprising that people like really latched onto, or maybe even, I've had this experience myself where as I dig deeper into actually creating the material, I discover new things myself that I didn't know. And yeah, as you're putting together the course itself, you learned some new things about Pina or how to do state management.
While I was putting out the course, and the different lessons and recording them and doing the exercises, I did fix a few bugs that I found on my library. So that's great. I mean, it's a win-win situation for everybody. I didn't get that many feedback from the course. Like most of the feedback I've gotten has been in person from people I known or through chat. Other feedback is the one I have asked directly to Vue School, who helped me launch this course. And the feedback has been really great. I was expecting for maybe some bad feedback too, or maybe they didn't send it to me, or maybe they don't want to tell me when they're in person, right? So I'm still waiting for some of the bad feedback where I could improve, to be honest, which is in retrospect a little bit sad. Because if you don't improve from something you build, I mean, I did get to learn a lot, but I think I was expecting to learn a bit more about my teaching practice too, right? Because I have been giving workshops for 7 years too, so or a bit more. So it's something I like doing, and I always ask in the workshop, and I usually get useful feedback actually from things that work, things that do not work, and I try to note that down. But a course is a completely different format. Recording videos is really, really different. I'm still waiting for that. I've seen people, I've been very pleased and surprised by how people react to some concepts. And it also helps when I explain some of the concepts. So of course, Mastering Pinia goes really deep into some advanced stuff, and it goes deeply technical. And so some people are really surprised when they discover something they didn't know, they never thought about. And that makes me really happy, but it also makes me realize, and this is also when I was writing the course, is that a lot of people don't know things that are supposed to be, in my opinion, or from my perspective, that would be a better way to put it in, intermediate. But because I'm always all the time into all these libraries, working with them, looking at the source code, I'm more used and I have a bigger context in my head about all the different possibilities, all the different things you have to do and you can do with these libraries. So sometimes I go over things that are simple for me too fast. And I think that course helped me also learn that. And in the feedback, I could see that maybe the course, it focused a lot on intermediate to expert. But in reality, I still go through the basics because I have to, right? I don't want to get right into difficult stuff. I still want to go through the basics and use that opportunity to really go deep into technical details that are interesting for a lot of engineers out there. And so that's something we actually realize, is that the course, it seems too specific to Pina. And Pina looks so simple, so easy to use, that, well, people are like, why would I need a course about these? And why is it so expensive? It's like right now it's less than 300. But the idea is, of course, there are sales around the year, so you can just wait for the sale if the price is really an issue. And the price also changes based on the country. I think you do the same. Adaptive pricing is called, something like that. But yeah, because people think it's just about Pina, they think it's too expensive, but in reality it covers a lot more, because it goes into global state management, explains all these things, testing, and good practices and composables, and server-side rendering for global state.
I had wondered about that. Like you've done such a great job of making Pina like such a small surface area that you don't have to think about it as much. And it just feels like you're writing regular Vue composition API, and like it's just like there's a little layer in between that, kind of melts away. And so then I do understand that people would have that feeling of, well, why do I need a whole course on it? But it's not just a course on Pina, it's a course on like state management in general and like all these other best practices. And state management is a big topic. And it's like, I've always thought that state management is one of the bigger and trickier things about applications, especially as you get to like bigger applications and dealing with global state and too much global state and all of that. So,
and we have multiple people in one team, and they all have to think together as a team to where do I put state, the abstractions you create, not to make them too early. It's complicated, and there is no one answer to it anyway. So just adapt on the go.
Yeah. And so before you had mentioned that there's a difference, you've done workshops a lot, and it's very different going from a workshop to a recording. And I've actually come the other way. I've done lots of recorded courses like video and stuff. And just in the last year or so have started to do more workshops and stuff. So I'd be interested to hear like what were the differences that you saw going from a workshop to recorded, and like maybe it's easy to assume it's like, oh, you just do a workshop and then you just record it instead of, instead of having someone else on the other side, you just hit record and then like, what's the difference really?
So that's what I thought at the beginning as well. But for me, the courses are way more time consuming than a workshop. When I started doing workshops, I had some exercises I prepared ahead of time. And by prepared, I mean that I know where I go. I know the different points of features that I wanted to bring the applications to. And so I would just more or less calculate the time I would spend on some concepts on Vue, because at the beginning I was doing workshops on Vue. And I would just go through the documentation when I was going to the workshop. That was the preparation. So it took me maybe a week to do preparation for a 3-day workshop. I mean, a week is much, way more than I did. The preparation was way, way shorter than that.
Right. You're
and
just
then I
planning
just
like
improvise everything.
The points. You're just like the little destinations along the way.
Exactly.
And like
it's a bullet point. Yeah. It's like the different points on the path. And then I just figure out the way, and I would make it very dynamic. So I had no slides, and I have been doing workshops without slides for a long time, actually. And it has been working very well, because I use the documentation. Some of the documentation who I actually contributed to a lot in the past, not that much now, but especially with Vue 2. And so I would go through the documentation and explain things and show the dev tools and live code some stuff for people to understand, answer questions. And so people get very engaged in these kind of workshops. And then we go through the exercises. And I can make mistakes. I can correct myself. And this makes it very natural. Like, it's not an issue. People do not expect you to be perfect. They make mistakes too. And it just makes things more natural. And also, if you have to debug something, they can see how you process an issue, a problem, a bug. And that's actually, it's funny because the times I've created a bug by accident on my corrections, they enjoyed the solution the most, because they told me it was really great to see you go through the debugging process of the bug. We learn a lot about how you use the DevTools and just your thought process. And then we also get the solution. Whereas when you do the course, you have multiple ways of doing the course. And I've tried to see how other people do and find the way that is closer to mine and adapt. And just because you have to find your own way, like with everything. But the thing is, you still write. So English is not my native language either, right? So I don't feel as natural coming up with a sentence and coming up with the whole explanation about something. I'm completely fluent, but I don't have the same precision on the vocabulary I could have on Spanish and French. And usually I have been given workshops in French. And so you can just talk about it very easily. In English, it's a bit more complicated. Also, you have to spend a little bit extra time, a little bit of attention to the pronunciation, so it doesn't come off too bad, too poorly. And so to make sure this works well, you basically write out a script. So there is a lot of preparation before recording the video. I've seen some people who just hit record and they start talking about it, and then they edit the thing. And so for me, that didn't work that well. I had to write the whole text, edit some stuff, create some demos, and maybe you have to create some slides to show what you're talking about. So what I prefer to do is actually show code, because that way I don't have to create the slide material, which takes even longer to prepare. And then I would have these small notes in the transcript so I can remember what I should show on the screen.
Right.
And I would hit record, and I would, if I don't have the camera, try to read with a tone that makes it feel natural. So it doesn't feel like you're completely reading, although people can tell. And probably if they use an AI, they can probably tell. I'm pretty sure. I'm confident. But it still makes things so much more manageable. And then you record the video so much faster because you have the text there. You don't have to read something and then look at the camera, right? And be like, okay, so now we're going to see how state management works. And the idea is you want to follow the script so well that it's so much easier for you to make mistakes, to mumble. Then you have to repeat the whole sentence. And sometimes there are paragraphs or you forget the middle of the sentence. And to me, this was horrible. I would take like 10 times the amount of time for record. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, so you're saying it was more of like the actual video recording and less about like preparing the different lessons, because you have experience with the preparation part, right?
It's just that depending on how you do the recording, the preparation process is going to take very long or not. For me, the workshop, the preparation is short because the workshop I can improvise. During the recording, I cannot improvise it well. I just mumble a lot.
Yeah.
But if I read, recording is fast, but preparation is long. With
Mastering Nuxt, so that was about almost 10 hours of video. There's a lot of video, and I wasn't that comfortable on video at the beginning. And so the first few lessons or sections, I actually had to, like, I recorded them and I had to re-record them because they weren't very good. And like my first process was what you said, like writing out word for word. This is like, I knew how to write articles. Like that was something I was comfortable with. So I wrote it like kind of like an article, and then I would like try to, okay, read what is this next paragraph, and then like look at the camera and then remember what it was that I was going to say, and then say it while also like doing the code changes and remembering what the code changes were. And like, I found that process to be really difficult because I had to like remember so many things at once. And I think like I do have an advantage in that English is my native language. So like, I think,
but still,
the improvisation part is a bit easier for me. So I switched to just keeping like bullet points of, okay, this lesson, we're going to start here. Then we change this file. And I had like the whole, like if we updated a method, I would just copy paste that whole method into the notes so that if I messed up or forgot what I was doing, I had the whole thing there. So I was like, okay, I know where I'm going. And then I was able to eventually get to a point where I could hit record, and it still took me a few takes probably, but I would sort of like more improvise my way along, and that ended up working better for me. But the hardest part for me was just getting in front of the camera to begin with, and public speaking is hard, and as I'm sure you know, and being in front of a camera is also hard. And it took me like, I don't know, it would take an hour or two to like hype myself up and get myself into like a mental state where I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Like, there's nothing funny on my face. My shirt is clean. Like, I don't have anything in my teeth. I'm like ready to go. And I'm ready to record. And then I could hit maybe like an hour of recording, and then I would just be like mentally drained for that day. And that was the hardest part for me. And so then over time, I got better at actually recording, and it was less and less exhausting. And now I do like this podcast every week, and I don't worry too much about it. I just like show up and hit record and we chat, and I'm not as self-conscious about being in front of the camera just because I've done it so many times now. So yeah. So you're going to be in Toronto next month. What is your talk on?
Well, I'm actually not 100% sure which one I'm going to do. I'm getting to a point where I'm stabilizing the data loaders API. So to make it short, data loaders API is an extension to VueRouter. By extension, I mean that it doesn't come in by default, at least yet. In any case, it doesn't add to the bundle if you don't use it. That allows you to run a synchronous operation to retrieve data and to be awaited in a navigation card. Now, this is just the baseline, async data in navigation cards. So the interesting part is more all the features that come with it. By using a navigation guard that is, of course, hidden from the user. And so you have a way of declaring these loaders in your pages components. You are collocating code. You have deduplications of requests. You have access to loading error states. You can nest the loader, so you can use some loader information in another one. So for example, you need to fetch some user information and then fetch some extra users, some connections, but you don't have this API that allows you to retrieve the whole thing in one go. So you can use nested. And all of these works seamlessly and deduped. So you only have one request going. So that's the difficult part of the implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been there for, I think, 1 year and a half, like usable 1 year and a half. I have been working on it for more than 2 years. Of course, I had a baby in between, so that slowed down a little bit the process of just doing things and advancing for me. But the API is pretty stable. I heard very good feedback on it, and I really want to finalize some of the last details. The documentation is already there. There are a few things that I want to improve, make sure that I don't have any breaking changes in mind yet, mm-hmm. right? Because you don't want to break the API so fast. And so there is a lot to show on how this makes your data fetching so much easier to handle. And it's such a simple API, and it becomes so intuitive. There is so little to learn and so much to get from its actual implementation, that I really want to spread it a little bit more. And the funny thing is that this API by itself, you can just use it with any basic asynchronous method and it would just work, right? But the thing that also made it a little bit difficult for me to implement is that it's not just an implementation, it's also some kind of spec. It's a specification, it's a set of interfaces. So anybody can create their own data loaders. And the goal of these is to not only have the data fetching integrated into the navigation guards, but to also be able to use all the libraries that have more full-fledged async state management solutions built in. So for example, Tanstack Query, Swerve, or GraphQL, whatever you want. And when I was building these, I've always wanted to build these. I mean, I built in the past some async state management libraries that were very simple, like VuePromise. And I wanted to build something a bit more complex. And I had this idea when I started building on Pinia, because you obviously have the name Pina Colada, which is really nice for another library. So I really wanted to use, and I already knew I wanted to do something related to async state management. So I built also this async state management layer, which is Pina Colada. So it uses Pina, it uses a Pina store, and adds another bunch of composables to have these client-side cache that brings your async state management to the next level. It really makes the data fetching in your application even better. So you still have almost the same API. It's the same data loaders, but you have the options that are specific to Pina Colada. And now you get all the goodies that come with Pina Colada, which is, well, you have stale, fresh, so you can dedupe even more requests. You can avoid fetching, like triggering network requests more often. And any library can do that, right? They have these specification they need to follow. I have a test suite that I need to properly expose, because right now it's still within the plugin VueRouter. So these two topics have some overlap. And I can explain one and cover the other one a little bit, but I cannot cover both in one talk. It's too much.
Yeah.
Yet they cover this topic of async or data fetching, because most of the time, let's be honest, people are going to use it for data fetching, but you can do so much more. And so I think in Toronto, I will be speaking about data loaders more than Pina Colada, but I'm not sure yet, because I really want to bring out some talks about Pina Colada. I think there is a lot of cool things to show.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'll be waiting to hear that one. To me, it sounds a little bit like what GraphQL is trying to solve, where it's like each component can sort of say what data it needs, but then you have like this global thing that kind of combines it all and and dedupe, so you're not fetching extra stuff. Is that kind of similar, or like how would you say it's different than like what
So
GraphQL might be doing?
GraphQL is going to work more on the server level, right? That
Right.
explication and that specification, that specification, sorry. Here we have something that is completely, I mean, it can be server side because you have SSR rendering, but it's specific to the front-end code, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
To be more clear. That's what it handles.
Okay.
It optimizes your data fetching in your application code. So you still consume your APIs. It doesn't bring anything to your APIs. You don't need to change your APIs. Your APIs, they come the way they want, as long as you have a promise. That's all you need.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds nice. I know you talked about this last year at the conference. I don't know if you mentioned it on stage, but I remember you mentioning the data loaders thing to me. And
I did mention on stage too, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I should check this out because it looks really good. Do you have the documentation on the?
Yeah, the documentation is pretty
live?
ready. It's live. It's uvr.esm.is. A weird domain name, but it means unplugging VueRouter.esm, which are my initials, Eduardo San Martin Morote.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for you all to find. And yeah, is there an RFC somewhere if people want to give feedback on?
So yeah, there was an RFC and it's still there. I did convert the whole RFC into documentation because this was getting so big. Like I'd never reading an RFC so big. And it's like how many pages? 7-8 pages of documentation now. So the repository is public. We have discussions for ideas for anything you want to discuss. The RFC is more like the technical view, but the documentation is comprehensible anyway.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in this, check it out and give feedback. Feedback is always good. Yeah. Especially like right now because it's not V1 yet, so it's easier to break things like you were saying. So
exactly. Have an impact.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Data fetching is always like, I don't know why it is so difficult in a lot of ways because you have all these different dependencies and like even in some of the simple apps that I'm building, like I have my own little course platform and running into issues with like I'm fetching the same data on like every single page. So that I'm like, okay, I can use nuxt.
Put it in a store.
Things, put it in a store, or you can cache it, or like there's a million different ways to do it, and just like trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way, what's the simplest way.
Yeah, it's also one of the issues is that you don't have a standardization of how to do data fetching, and they all have the pros and cons. Mm-hmm. And so I also go through that in some of the talks.
Yeah. I mean, we need better data fetching stuff, so I'm here for it. So one of the things you put in the notes here are organizing a meetup.
Right. So I started the Vue.js meetup in Paris. I think it was 2017. Right. It was a while ago, maybe 2016. I'm not completely sure. And then, so it was actually really nice. Like I had some people who could help at some point, and we did have a time where we had a meetup every month.
Okay.
And it's pretty nice as an organizer, as an attendee. I think that in big cities, depending on the countries, I don't know all the countries. I know that in the US, they also do this. But in Paris, at least, there is a big tech community and you have a lot of events about languages, frameworks, other things. And you can go there, you can help organize. Of course, it's all free. So if you organize, it's not something you get paid for, but you need to spend a little bit of time on it. And most of the time, they are monthly. And people come, give a talk. It's also a way for people to start giving talks, right? It's like a smaller version. It's like the beginner level public speaking.
Yeah.
And this is how I started also. I still remember how nervous I was the first time I was just speaking in front of. It was, I don't know, 70 people. It was so little in a meetup compared to what you get at a conference. And it's a fun experience, even organizing, honestly, because it's not that much work, especially if you're not alone, because you can split the task. And so currently in Paris, there is Elise and now Florian. So two other people. Elise is at the Vue.js Germany conference right now. She was giving a talk about Pina Colada. Florian is he joined recently. He was helping with organization too. And with more people, when you're by yourself, honestly, it's a little bit boring if you don't get any people to help you, if you don't manage to have people join you. But when you are with more people, it feels like just organizing an event with friends. It's like, oh, it's like you're throwing up a party, more or less.
Right.
People come, they want to learn about something and then chat with other people.
Yeah, hang out.
With other people in tech, hang out. And after COVID, so during COVID, of course, it was closed, and slowly later they started to appear a bit more. But clearly, the scenes of meetups is damaged. It hasn't recovered yet. I think it's recovering in a way. I don't think it will ever recover because Meetup has also changed a lot of its policies, the platform itself. But it would be nice to see more Meetup communities appearing around the world for you.
Yeah. I've thought about doing one before, and I wasn't sure about how much time commitment it would take. I think the biggest thing is trying to find a space to do it in. So I'd need to like, how do you figure that out? Like, do you have like companies offering to give like office space? I think I've seen that done before, or like
that's how it works. You usually have people, the companies that want to host because they get some exposure from it. And so it's important to have some kind of network. So if you go to meetups, you get to know these people, and then you get to have the context of companies that are willing to host the event. So you have to get into the meetup scene in a way, but it's accessible. Like, it's completely free. You just go to the events and meet people. It's time consuming at the beginning, I think. And then you can safely assume that, okay, if I put 1 hour or less every week, I can organize these in a more streamlined or smooth way, as long as you have speakers. Of course, you need to have speakers.
Yeah. And then you have to get people to speak. And so I think of there are so I'm in Waterloo, which is just outside of Toronto, and it's a smaller city. I think, I don't know, 300, 400,000 people. So it's not that big, but the thing
400,000 people?
Yeah.
That's a small city.
Yeah. Well,
that's a small city.
I know, but I think in Canada, it's like the 10th biggest city.
It's not that. That's top 10.
Yeah, top 10. So it's pretty good. And so we have partly because we have a university here, but it's also like got a lot of tech startups. BlackBerry was founded here, and I think that's historically part of the reason why. So then there's like, when they had a rough time, like 15 years ago, then a lot of people left and started other tech companies. And so then it's just kind of like created a whole like tech scene here. So there's like so many software developers and tech companies. And that's actually like why I'm here, because there were jobs here. So I came here. So I think there's a JavaScript meetup here, which I've been meaning to attend, but I haven't gotten out to yet. Having a baby recently makes things a bit different, but there could be a chance that a Vue meetup would have enough people come out to it.
How many times do they do the GS? Like, is it every month, every 2 months?
I think it's every month.
Every month. Every month it's like amazing. It's like the best. But I think going for one every 3 months is totally fine too.
Yeah. Well, and part of it is, I think now a lot of companies are just remote. And so like for me and a lot of other people, we're just like sitting in our basements and chatting like over the internet to people. And so seeing other people in person that you can talk to about similar interests and stuff is so nice. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the podcast episode for today. Thank you for coming on and talking about all the different things. Is there anything else you would like to say, or like where can people find you if they want to follow up and connect with you?
Follow me on Twitter as posva. I think that's where I contact more. I've been trying to be more active lately.
Yeah.
Or GitHub, or Discord we're connected to.
Okay. Well, all of the links will be in the description. If you are wanting to meet up with me and Eduardo and Alex in Toronto, we have special code DejaVue. If you go, you'll get 15% off on tickets for that. And you can come meet us in Toronto and we'll be there. We can hang out and talk about data loaders and whatever else we want to talk about.
Meetups, whatever.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen any previous episodes or want to catch up, we've got, I think this is episode 30. So we've got a bunch. And, check out one with Evan. We've got one with Daniel Rowe. We've got a whole bunch of awesome people that we've talked to in the past, awesome topics. So you can check that out. And we will see you in the next one.